Hello everyone, and today I'm going to do a comparison between the Nikon D600 and Nikon D700. So, of course, this is mirrorless reviews, but none of these are mirrorless. Well, I'm filming with an OMD, so there is the mirrorless aspect. So, moving on. So the D600 is a new full-frame prosumer camera by Nikon, and it's the smallest full frame that Nikon has produced so far, and the biggest difference right away you see is the size and the weight, right? So let me just do a comparison first of just the size between the D600 and D700. The reason I have the D700 here is because I feel like a lot of users will be upgrading from the D700 because the D800 simply has too many megapixels. So let's start from side. So you see right away that D700 is taller and the grip is more substantial. I'll get to that in a few minutes. So this is the back. Not a huge difference, but the D600 does appear smaller. The top, definitely not a lot of difference here. The D600 is a little shorter in terms of the width. And on the side, so again you see D700 is taller and thicker, and from the front, not a substantial difference, but you will feel it when you hold the camera. And the reason for that is mainly because the D600 is lighter, and you can see this is plastic, right, and this is metal. This is magnesium alloy, I believe. So this is the reason behind the weight reduction. And D600 weighs, I think, about 850 grams, whereas the D700, the body by itself, is 1,085 grams. So there's 280 grams difference here, and that is a lot. When you pick this up, you feel like you just picked up a hunk of metal, right? And this one, not as much, right? It feels like kind of a pro APS-C kind of feeling picking this up, like the D7000. So what that really means, just to put things in perspective, is, so for example, this lens, this is a 50mm 1.8G. This weighs about 185 grams. So even when this is mounted on the D600, it still weighs 50 grams less than just the D700 body. So that is a pretty major difference, and you'll feel it after you use the cameras for a while, or at least your wrist will feel it. And I mentioned the grip, so this is a very important aspect for me because the grip is one of the major aspects of the ergonomics. So the D700, the grip feels very, very good. So I think it's the best grip besides the D3, D4 line from Nikon. This is better than D7000, better than D800, and it just feels very well sculpted, right? But going to the D600, the grip is a lot skinnier, and you can kind of tell here. It's I mean, it might not look that different on video, but you can sure feel the difference. So here, this ridge is very squared, so it looks like this, whereas the D700, it's got a curve to it, and this kind of goes into your palm. So if you've got medium to large hands, you'll definitely feel a significant difference in the grip. This one, you feel like your hand will get tired after a while. There's like a gap here, whereas this one, the D700, you don't really have that gap, and you can feel the camera being held very solidly in your hand. But the grip is better than D7000. Having used the D7000, it's a little more thicker, and it's not as good as D800. So in terms of ranking, I'll rank the grip from worst to best from D7000, D600, D800, and D700. So D700's grip is a lot better. Now let's do a tour around the body and mention some of the differences between the two cameras. So let's start from the front. So not too much difference here. Both have the function and the depth of field buttons. Those can be reprogrammed. And onto the right, so You see here from the top, the D700 has a mechanical release for flash. The D600 doesn't. This is like a sign of prosumer. And there is a bracketing button here. That's not programmable actually. And this one has the new autofocus toggle switch right here, which has been around since the D7000. Whereas this one, you have a switch between continuous single and manual. Here you have autofocus and manual, and when you press this button and use the dial on the other side, then you can change between the different areas. So it pretty much consolidated this button and this button right here. So I really prefer this one because you can toggle it very quickly, whereas with the other one I have to think about it, at least now I do. So press it, and then I have to think about which dial does what, right? So this dial does something different than this dial, and it's not as easily changed. So also the D700, just like the D800 and D300, has the PC sync terminal, so for flash, also remote shutter, whereas D600 has the infrared remote. So both are useful in their own respects. This one, yeah, you got the corded remote, but you can't really use it to take a group photo with yourself in it. This one, you can do that from a long distance away. So this is really no big difference for me because I don't use the sync flash from these ports. So let's move on to the ports, speaking of which. So the D600 has a lot more ports. It has headphone and mic on the top, and HDMI and USB. By the way, this is a hinged port opening, which is nice because it doesn't want to close on you. And then it's got a GPS thing on the bottom. So the D700 is a little more simpler. It's got one flap that's kind of flimsy. It's got a HDMI, video out, this port, this is USB, and this is DC in, so this is DC power going in. The D600 also has DC in, but it's going to be through this location. So you pull this flap out after you open this door, and then you go in through here. Alright, so let's move on to the back. So you can tell these are very similar, right? It's you're not going to have any problem moving from one camera to the other. However, the button layout is different. So here this is the magnifying zoom out, zoom in, whereas this is zoom in, zoom out, and OK. So there's a little bit of a difference here. Also, of course, this one doesn't have shared functions. It's up here. You have ISO, white balance, and quality. Whereas here you have these ones sharing double functions. Also, this dial thing is what they call the commander dial. I'm not sure, but this thing is a little bigger than the D600. The D600 has the smallest dial of all cameras. I've used so far right here. I don't know why they made it so small. Also, because now they don't need this switch here, they have replaced it with the live view switch, which I think is identical to D800. So to go into camera mode, you just press this when it's toggled to camera, and then press this when it's toggled to the video when you want to do video recording. I don't know why they need two modes, because you can go into camera or just live view and then press this for record, but I don't know, maybe it's some licensing issue. So here's the info button, and this is the info button here on the D700, and they do have slightly different information. So the information on the D600 is a little more detailed, so it's got things like FX, shutter mode, picture control, those kind of things, whereas the D700 there isn't. And this thing either displays frames left or ISO. I mean, it doesn't display ISO, whereas D600 displays ISO and frames left. So a little more detailed on the info screen. So if you do a lot of studio work, that's going to be helpful. And what else? Yeah, so the Viewfinder, that's different now. So instead of a round viewfinder where you can unscrew this and then switch out with a different kind of lens, this one is now a rectangular kind of window, but the magnification is about the same, so you still get the large full frame view from this viewfinder, just like the D700. However, this one has 100% viewfinder view, where this one is 95%, so it might seem like not much, but when you take a picture you do realize there is a lot of cropping around the edges when it's 95%. So really, when you're shooting, you're using 95% of 12 megapixels, whereas here you use 100% of 24 megapixels. That's frameable. And also the screen. So the screen's not that different. This one's 3.2 inches. This one's 3 inches diagonal. So in terms of pixel counts, they're about the same. One's 921,000, one's 920,000. So it's pretty much the same. And I don't notice any quality differences, except this one has a more of a greenish tint, just like the D800. So the pictures appear differently. I'm not sure if it's the sensor or the LCD at this point. And going up here, so this is the diopter control, and this one has moved over here. So D700 has an AF on button, so this is very useful when you when we don't want to do recompose and shoot all the time for a stationary object. So this one, you can program the button on D600. This one has AF on as well, but once you do that, the quirky thing is then half pressing does not activate AF on anymore. So it's either or. On this one, this will always be AF on, and half press will always do AF or not, depending on the menu option. So you have a choice here, whereas here you don't. And let's see, what else? Oh yeah, one big thing is, I mean, it looks minor, but it's pretty big in terms of usage, is the center button here, so the OK button here. So once you take a picture on the D700, you can press this once. So let me see. So you can press the center button once to zoom in to 100% view, and this is very, very useful, right? You can check your focus accuracy right away. Whereas on the D600, when you press the OK button, you get the retouch menu. So this is pretty dumb. Why would I? There's no reason to do retouch when you're just trying to quickly review your image. Plus the fact that you can go to the same function through this dedicated button. So it's as if Nikon is intentionally crippling the D600 so that pros would avoid it. So that's very annoying. It's obviously can be done through a firmware change, but I doubt they would do that since D7000 has the same problem right here. The center button is pretty useless. Alright, so moving on to the right side. So here's another difference. The D600 has 2 SD slots, whereas the D700 has 1 CF slot. So in terms of formats, there's really no pros and cons to me. I have SD and NCF, but the overflow and the backup option on the D600 is very useful. So if you do anything that is critical and that you can't lose the data, then the dual slot will be very useful for you. Now on the top, so the D700 has the dedicated ISO, white balance, and quality buttons, whereas on D600 you have a mode dial. So I think this is the first mode dial on a 100 series camera for Nikon, and there's a lock thing, so you have to press this in to be able to move it. So it's up to individual preference whether they like doing it this way or the mode button on here. I kind of like this because you can tell right away what mode you're in, and also it offers you the U1, U2 custom modes, so you can store your values in here, and this is 100 times better than the custom banks that D700 has, because you can store things in here. When you change it, it doesn't erase the setting that's stored, so you can go back to this and then things will be restored. So these are a lot more useful than the custom settings banks.